Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Phil and I'm the Ordinary Watch Guy. I'm very ordinary, but the watches are always special. Today we're going to delve into the wild story of the Bulova Lunar pilot. It's regarded to be the other moon watch, and I'm not telling it because I'm a salty Omega fanboy. I'm telling it just because, I don't know, to me something's a little bit off, and I thought I'd open it up to people, some of the facts of the actual event. Hit me in the comments with your thoughts, but hear me out before you do. Let's get into it. The accepted story of the Bulova Moonwatch, the lunar pilot, is that all of the astronauts aboard the Apollo 15 mission were issued with Omega Speedmaster moonwatches, and that one of the watches failed. Now, we know that the Omega Speedmaster Professional is the super reliable, legendary chronograph that had some significant hand in saving 3 astronauts during the near disaster that was the Apollo 13 mission. Following this triumph, Omega were given the Silver Snoopy Award. Now, for those who don't know what the Silver Snoopy Award is, it's a little pin badge that you put on. It's like a commendation from NASA. It shows Snoopy the dog from the Peanuts cartoon in a spacesuit. The idea behind this award is that it goes to people or to organizations that have aided the safety of space flight and that have saved lives. Omega are famously coy about admitting that they were given this award. The Apollo 15 mission happened in August 1971, and Omega were the trusted supplier of watches. But this time things were different, and David Scott stated that he had a problem with his Omega watch and said that the Hess-like crystal popped off. But luckily, Scott had brought his own watch with him, presumably just in case something like this might happen. This watch was American made. It's the Bulova chronograph. And David Scott, now 93 years old, and unlike his Speedmaster, still ticking, was interviewed by Fratello Watches and Robert Jan Brouwer on the 30th of September 2015, so not quite 10 years ago. And in that interview, at the age of 83, Scott said that prior to the mission, he'd been contacted by the corporate management at Bulova in the lead up to Apollo 15. They wanted Scott to evaluate the suitability of their watch for space flight. And Scott took the watch as his backup. But this decision didn't involve NASA. And according to the Bulova legend, the watch performed exactly as they wanted it to. Today, as a consequence of this lineage and endorsement, Bulova present the lunar pilot as a tribute to their own moon watch. And we can see they've done some pretty cheeky things with their own model to make sure that that's in people's minds. It's a quartz, it has a tuning fork mechanism, and that was a piece of breaking innovation and technology at the time, and was part of the early dawn of the forthcoming quartz crisis. You can buy a lunar pilot today without much of a struggle for around £400. And from handling one recently, it seems like a great watch, very well built indeed. And moreover, if you check out the Omega Speedmaster Moonwatch, I think it looks more futuristic. It has that Flash Gordon aesthetic, and it's got those smooth, flat pushers instead of the 1950s almost steampunk pump style pushers that you get on the Omega Speedmaster. But the face, you know, the dial of the watch itself is almost clone-like, but it's got a smooth, sand-blasted stainless steel case, and it's got so much more kind of an aerodynamic feel to it. It's smoother on all of its edges. It's less square. It's definitely trying to be the next step forward. Accepting absolutely that it may be just as it was explained, let's give some further consideration to what seems to have transpired. First of all, by the account of astronaut Dave Scott, he got approached by Bulova's corporate management to evaluate this watch. This wasn't a watch that he just took out of the top drawer of his dresser on the way out of his house. Additionally, he didn't consult with NASA on the acquisition of this standby piece of technology. He said that he didn't know the man responsible for procurement. As a consequence, this choice seems to have slipped under the radar, as it were. The terms of this approach by Bulova to an independent member of the astronaut team has not been published. We don't know. Was it a request from Bulova to Scott to do them a solid favour? It sounds unlikely to me that an organisation like Bulova would just get in touch with a NASA astronaut and just persuade him out of the goodness of his heart to just put their watch on standby without it really being checked out, without it being subject to the same rigorous standards that the Omega Speedmaster had been subjected to. The 2015 interview with Scott is pretty good, but it didn't go there, and that's probably an uncomfortable place for Scott to answer questions. But here's where we hit a series of coincidences that might seem a little bit uncomfortable, because Bulova really landed a moonshot with this one in choosing Scott to have their watch in his back pocket, because they managed to put their watch into the hands of the only astronaut who has reported to have had a failure of their Omega Speedmaster in 11 crewed Apollo missions out of 24 other astronauts. Bulova managed to put all their chips on the table on exactly the right number. Now, this could be entirely unconnected, of course, but the crew of Apollo 15 also arranged with a friend named Horst Eiermann to carry postal covers to the moon. Now, a postal cover is like a card that's got stamps on it and stuff like that, in exchange for about £7,000 each, which today is worth about $55,000 each. There's no two ways of going about saying what this deal was done like. It was a side hustle, and without the proper permissions from NASA, they didn't know that their astronauts, who they were paying, were also getting paid by somebody else to do something else while they were up in space. And when they returned to Earth, 100 of these postal covers were given back to Horst Eiermann, and apparently they ended up for sale in West Germany. In the affair, all three astronauts ended up returning their monies, presumably to Eiermann, and were reprimanded by NASA. Reading the 2015 interview in light of that information makes quite the difference. The interview never delves into the postal covers side hustle, and nor does it link the unethical behavior of the astronauts to the introduction of an alternative watch that NASA never approved. And I guess there's no way for Scott to know that wearing the Bulova would be remotely this lucrative. But he subsequently sold his watch at auction for a reported $1.6 million. In hindsight, it was definitely in Scott's best interests for that Amiga to fail on that mission. Scott himself, again in the 2015 interview, said that he identified how important the flight watch was, and that it was, in his own words, a single point of failure, and he considered it a matter of prudence to carry a backup, which is understandable. I can see that. Is it not a valid question then to ask whether it would have been more prudent for him to go and get an identical watch tested to the same standards, with the likelihood of that watch failing being much, much lower? Or does it seem reasonable for him to use an untested model with questionable and uncertain qualities as a privately sourced backup option? As an astronaut, why would you go with the second scenario rather than the first? NASA could have sent Scott to the moon with pretty much an unlimited number of Speedmaster watches. I'll leave you to decide what it was that really influenced the decision, because I don't know for sure, and I can't tell you precisely one way or the other. These things don't reflect well on Scott, and they don't reflect well on the Bulova organization either. This unofficial space trial that wasn't approved by NASA, well, it just seems a little bit off to me. I remain skeptical about the failure of the Moonwatch. In the lack of complete clarity, and as a dyed-in-the-wool Amiga fanboy admittedly, I'm going to tell you that it's the Moonwatch that I trust above everything else in this story. In the spirit of the piece, if Amiga would like to send me a silver Snoopy 50th anniversary watch to thank me for defending their reputation and asking the relevant questions, Amiga, I just want you to know that I'm completely down with that, and you can do that at your leisure. So I hope you've enjoyed this little bit of intrigue. I've left a link to the Fratello Watches interview beneath so that you can draw your own conclusions in regards to that. I invite your comments and considerations on what I think is a fascinating chapter in the history of horology and spaceflight. Do you own a Bulova Lunar Pilot? What's your opinion on the watch? What do you make of it? Are you an owner of a Speedmaster Moonwatch? And has the Hess-like crystal ever popped off your watch in unfortunate circumstances? Maybe you were in zero gravity. Who knows? Let me know. Would you take your own watch to space if you could sell it years later for a $1.6 million profit? As I always do, I want to invite you to subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate your support and your help growing this little channel of mine. Click subscribe, give me a like to boost what I'm trying to do here. It takes just a second, it costs nothing at all. I'll be back soon with some more content. Why not enjoy one of my previous videos before then? And in the meanwhile, stay safe, enjoy your watches, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.